All right, welcome back to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. I'm super excited. You've seen him on the marquee, the name of the podcast here. Help me welcome Mr. Brian Kula. Brian, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great this morning. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It is a beautiful day, and I get to talk to coaches for a living, so I'm not sure I have a bad day, to be real honest with you, man.
Good for you. Good for you.
Brian, you run your own business here, Kula Sports Performance. I want to, before we kind of head into your history, maybe talk to us. What in the world does that mean? What is Kula Sports Performance?
Sure. Yeah. No, we're an environment where we work with athletes from the youth all the way up to the professional level of athletic development, power output, strength, speed, all your standard athletic development programming. Here in Denver, South Metro, the Highlands Ranch area, we have our own facility that we just opened about a year ago and are in the process of expanding right now. Needed some more square footage. We've had a little bit of success in growing that business model, and not exactly being 48 years old, to reinvent myself where I thought I'd be headed. But after a long coaching career and working with some professional athletes, this was just kind of the natural segue into my next chapter.
Yeah. Hey, that'll be interesting to explore as we go through your history. I didn't find my career, this is my third career, right? So I didn't find this one until 30 years old. And I thought that was like, society tells us we have to have it all figured out by 30. Like if you don't know what you're doing by 30, you've lost, right? So it's always interesting to hear about, as we get to 40, 45, we're roughly the same age, to reinvent and do something, tangential maybe, but still different than what we did. Yeah, that takes a lot of guts, man. Your own business, that's a big deal.
Yeah, not a lot of people reinvent themselves at 48 years old. But there have been a couple different attempts and maybe kind of some seasonal, like you said, kind of a segue where it just worked out the way it worked out. It wasn't like it was intentional, but it's been really positive. And, again, I started coaching at a young age. And so that let my career kind of run its course and still have maybe some, few holes on the back nine here to do something cool for, hopefully many more athletes.
And you talked about it's sports performance. So you're working with, I'm guessing here, football, basketball, track, kind of all across the board.
Yeah, we pretty much work with any athlete, any human that moves. We are definitely a speed priority, especially with my background in track and field of speed development and feeling like that's a major component to all athletes. And so we've taken some of those concepts and principles and applied them to swimmers, golfers, hockey players, and then if your standard, basketball, football, baseball athletes obviously benefit from it. But we've seen a huge benefit from even non-land sports like swimming and hockey, where, we're seeing increases in skate speed just from some of the speed work we're doing on the ground. And then the weightlifting component, we've tried to change the model a little bit of how that's done with athletes, and tried to break the mold a little bit from old school stuff that's happened for a lot of years. And so that's kind of where our footprint is right now. But yeah, any athlete that moves, we feel like we can help.
I like that definition. If you move, we can help. So
it's sometimes pretty good client base.
Yeah. Sometimes I get up in the morning and I can't move.
Right?
That's where I need help at, man. And so talk to us. You talked about the facility that you started and opened up now, and then you're expanding. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So, it was roughly about a year and a half ago. I had been training some professional athletes kind of as a side hustle in conjunction with my high school coaching job. And that went really well. And so we started getting a little more attention and clients that wanted us to work with them. And so we ended up with an opportunity to go into a facility and share some space with another group that actually has a national presence. And so we took about 6,000 square feet out of their building and started operating in January of last year. And it went really well. We've had good retention and through that processing in the summer and everything, we've had to grow a little bit. So we've kind of doubled our square footage. But then also our relationship with that group, it's called Cheer Athletics, has a national presence. They have about 12 facilities in the country. They're a national franchise. And we've formulated a partnership with them to go into their facilities across the country and provide a similar type of training for their athletes. So yeah, we went from a little startup first year sports performance business to potential national franchise kind of situation. Wow. So we're still kind of working through the weeds of that, and it's really in its infancy. We'll open our first one up in Rochester, New York here in about 3 or 4 months. And then Charlotte, North Carolina be on deck next. And then we're looking at some of the locations down in Texas as our kind of our next swing. So just as they are ready and we are ready, we're going into those different places and, figuring out how to duplicate ourselves across the country.
Yeah, Rochester, I went there for the first time, I guess 2 years ago for a site visit for the NCAA. St. John's Fishers was hosting. I'd never been to Rochester.
Yeah.
It's a cool area, man. Like
it really is.
I was
I had never
impressed.
been to upstate New York ever in my life, just in and out of Manhattan, and got to go there. They'll have a location in Buffalo as well. And so there's kind of a, a presence up there, and it's afforded me some travel, and I met some really neat people, and, really forced me to kind of expand my mind a little bit on how to, we're still trying to do it well here just in Denver, and now we're trying to duplicate ourselves.
And you mentioned that part of the business that's called cheer athletics.
Yeah, Cheer Athletics. It's a national organization. Their mothership is in Plano, Texas, and it's a huge organization of cheer athletes, and they do elite level, international, world competition kind of stuff. And again, another example of athletes that are benefiting from our training system.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Stability, mobility, the way we teach them to push through the ground. I mean, we treat a cheerleader very similar to a sprinter, of how we train the body and the energy systems. And what we're finding in the feedback we're getting from the coaches is they're getting much better performances and ability in their, tricks or whatever you want to call it that they're doing. They're getting much better at that through the training.
Yeah, I'm not going to upset the entire cheer community, so I'll keep some of my opinions to myself. However, I remember watching once on ESPN, I think it was called, so the normal cheer, right? The 10, 15 different groups, and they do some amazing, I mean,
yeah,
it's athletic. Let me just put that out there. It is athletic. It's unbelievable. The most athletic I ever saw, though, I don't remember what the actual name was. Maybe it was called partner cheer. So it was one guy and one girl.
Yeah.
And it was like literally unbelievable. I mean, the guy is throwing her around, and she's wrapping around, and it was. Like, I was like, oh, if you think cheerleading is not athletic, watch this and tell me you don't see everything that we do in like a sport like track and field, movements and twists and turns. It was unbelievable. It's amazing.
Well, next go around, it's going to be an Olympic sport. And so they've actually elevated it to that level. And, and I didn't know a whole lot about it. I've been an athletic director and oversaw cheer and poms, and, it's a much different environment. And, what we've seen is a highly athletic, athlete that, again, they move and can benefit from some of the things that we enhance for them. And there's some strength movements involved and explosive power and, all the same things that you need out of a thrower or a hurdler or whatever. So it's been really a unique, cool ride, and met some really neat people involved, and really didn't have any presence or, vision of this, launching like it did. But I think that's where, you just put your faith in, what's out in front of you. And so it's been a really neat opportunity. We've met some great people, and I think we're helping a lot of athletes.
Well, we believe healthy things grow. So growing is good, man. Congratulations. It's a little bit scary at the same time as exciting, right?
Exciting and terrifying all in the same sentence.
That also sounds like parenthood now that I think about it.
That's true.
Well, let's take a step back, Brian. Let's talk about, that's awesome what you're doing now, and just, want to bless you as you continue growing and working with athletes and other coaches around the country. Let's take a step back and learn more about you. And you're doing a lot of good things with basketball, football, track athletes, cheer athletes. It sounds like maybe this was all kind of grounded in track and field, though, which makes a lot of sense for all of us that, everybody's shaking their head right now listening, like, yeah, of course, that's fundamental to every sport. So maybe let's take a step back. When did track and field become a part of your life? Was it were you a high school athlete, middle school athlete, not a track athlete at all? Where does it start for you?
Yeah, I was, track and field's kind of been a part of my life since I was born. My dad was a coach. And so really, we were talking a little bit earlier about mentors and, people who are influential. And I really only have one person to point to and credit for, me being involved and stuff like that. And that was my dad, who was a, high level athlete himself, multi-sport in college, Hall of Fame guy, who was a pole vaulter and played on the football team and, did all these things. And so when I was a little shaver, we were involved in track and field, and I used to kind of tease people and say that I thought I went to the University of Oregon because he was such a big, Phil Knight, Bill Bowerman, kind of guy. And so we always kind of followed Oregon because track and field was such a big deal up there. And so, I mean, even from a very young age, I was traveling the country to junior Olympic track meets. And, I was in a club that was about 45, 50 minutes away from my where we lived. My mom would drive me down to track practice, a couple times a week in the summertime. And I was really pretty deeply rooted in it from an early age. And I just loved it. I loved the way the sport was set up. It was very social. There were girls and boys, and, there was just like this kind of family feel, and loved the competition side of it's me versus you, not, a team or anything like that. And I'm a big team guy. And even my track programs would say that we're a big relay, kind of scenario, and love the team aspect. But there's just nothing like lining up to run the 110-meter high hurdles, you against 7 other guys. And so, I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, but I would say that track and field was probably where I had most of my success.
You mentioned Oregon, and of course, it's Tracktown, USA, but did you grow up in Oregon, or where was or did dad go to school there?
That's the irony. We, we all went to Northern Colorado, my mom and dad, me and my brother and sister, and we're a Colorado kind of based family. But Oregon just had that, from the 70s on, they were track and field, kind of the birthplace of American track and field. And so I just use that as a funny example of it is Tracktown USA. And I, sometimes I feel like, I may have graduated from there, but I've only been on the campus for track meets. So,
right. So it's interesting. Explore this. Your dad's a coach. So can I assume he coached you, like maybe in the high school level at least? Yeah. So, it's one thing we talk about athletes that are dedicated and coaches that pour into them. And in 99% of the cases, that coach goes home to his or her family, and the kid goes home to his or her family. Yeah. The family is the coach, is the track coach, is the track family, is the track team. What's it like, especially you made it sound at least like your dad was like a pretty high level athlete, specifically track and field. So what's it like being the coach's kid of a dad who was a great athlete, who's coaching? What's that kind of environment, and how do you deal with it's always on, you're going home with coach?
Sure. Yeah, no, professional development from the time I was about 12 years old. I mean, I was formulating ideas, I think, in training, and, just in coaching. I never really even considered doing anything else with my life, because I was watching him, and I pretty much grew up in a weight room or a gym or a track, kind of following him around. And I mean, it was very special, obviously relationship to be able to, have your dad be your coach. And it didn't come without stress at sometimes. It's hard to leave it at the track or leave it on the field when you came home, because he had high expectations. And but I think all those things kind of molded, what I was set up to do moving forward. And he was really good about, involving us kids with what he was doing. And like I said, I'd leave school as an elementary age kid and go hang out in his office and watch him coach basketball and football and track. And so I had a great role model and example of, a guy who, unfortunately, he passed away about 4 years ago, but and never really had like huge achievement in regards to worldly success and, state champions or national champions or anything. But the guy impacted so many people and kids, and it just really, I guess, showed me what was important about coaching.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to have to challenge you there, because, I talk to coaches, beyond the podcast, right? This is my whole life as coaches, right? Specifically in the sport of track and field. And sometimes we get, I'm going to say, caught up into that. If I'm not if I'm not a coach at an LSU or Oregon or Texas, I'm not having success. I'm not impacting, I'm not successful. Right. And it's actually the exact opposite. We have coaches in little town Alabama, little town Colorado, middle of nowhere Texas, which is the most of Texas, right? But where you are at today, whether you have one kid you coach, 100 kids you coach, you're affecting young people's lives positively. And what's awesome about it, in a math perspective, is that 1 to 100 kids goes on to become doctors, fathers, mothers, lawyers, grocery clerks, etc., business owners. And they affect people positively. So your dad may not have coached a world record holder, but hold up your hands if you have never coached a world, like most of us right now are holding our hands, right? That's a, you know, that's a 0.0111%, right? But your dad had huge worldly success, man. He, first of all, just in your own life, man, look where you are today. So I always want to challenge people when they say, you know, we didn't do X, Y. It's like, no. You are doing so much more, having more effect on the world, honestly, than someone who you coaching the fastest human out there. So did you, as your dad was a pretty good athlete as well, did you feel any pressure, whether it was from him or just internal, to do the same events that he did as an athlete, or did you kind of go your own route there?
You know, he did a wonderful job as a parent of allowing us to kind of pursue what we wanted to pursue. And I mean, I had some opportunity to play a little football in college, and, you know, dabbled in basketball and did different things. And I kind of picked, you know, track and field as my I did decathlon. So I was actually a decathlete.
Nice.
And that wasn't anything that he had ever done. You know, he was just kind of a standout jumper, hurdler type guy. And but he allowed us, I mean, his only ask was ever to whatever you were going to do it to the best of your ability, you know, kind of a concept. And so, you know, he would stand behind us no matter what it was that we wanted to do. It's just, you know, you weren't going to do it halfway. So, you know, I inherited that as both an athlete, and then I think that carried over into my coaching career as well.
That's a heck of a trait to pick up. That's a good one. Yeah. So as you mentioned, you went to Northern Colorado, right, for college.
Yep.
As you were transitioning from high school to college, where were you in your headspace for a career? Was it like, yep, I'm following dad's steps, I'm going to be a coach? Or, you know, a lot of us rebel when we're kids, right? Or was it like, I'm going to do the exact whatever I don't know what what is the opposite of coaching? Accounting? I don't know. Computer programming? I don't know what the exact opposite is, but what were you thinking at that point as you start going into college for career?
Yeah. I 100% honest. I never had a thought of doing anything other than being a coach. I mean, from the time, and I really didn't do any coaching per se in high school. You know, I was an athlete and did all my stuff. And then I went off to college, and I mean, I immediately enrolled in kinesiology classes, and I was going to head down the path of phys ed. And I just loved sports. I loved athletes. I don't know that I knew anything different. My grandfather was a coach. My dad was a coach. It was, I guess you could say, it was in the blood. And, you know, when you don't have a lot of examples of other stuff, you know, like, hey, like you said, my dad's a banker, my dad's a car salesman. We just didn't ever even see that as an example to even be in our, or on our radar. And so it was always just coach or bust, you know? And then, you know, and again, you know, from him in high school and growing up to even my college coach, Scott Hall, who's now at High Point University.
Scott Hall was your coach.
Scott Hall was my college coach.
I love Scott Hall. That's awesome, man. What a great guy.
So, I mean, so knowing him, you'd know then that I was very, very blessed to go from my dad into the, you know, the tutelage of Scott Hall, and, you know, a guy who gave you the shirt off his back to, you know, and just all he cares about is, you know, human interaction and development of character and athletic ability. So I don't know that I had much choice, Mike, in what I wanted to do with my life.
Right.
I just had all these people around me that that's what they did. And I saw great things out of it. And I just looked up to those people of, you know, how they impacted others. And that's what I wanted to do.
Well, as soon as you said Scott Hall, I was like, oh, the decathlon makes so much sense now. Like, oh, you didn't have a choice there either. I get it.
You're right. You're right.
Scott was one of our, back when I coached, I was blessed to be the USATF junior elite high hurdle coach. So we got to bring the top 5 high hurdlers in this country that were 19 and under out to Chula Vista at the Olympic Training Center. And Scott was the decathlon, and also I think maybe the high jump. And so their group was out there with us for a few years at the same time. So that's how I got to initially know Scott. What a great, I mean, just energetic, always, I don't want to say always on, but at least from the outside, always positive, ready to coach. I mean, he'd coach a dog to high jump if that's all he had in front of him, man. He would just get it done, man. He's so cool.
That's right.
Shout out to Scott Hall, man. Love that guy. So you said you immediately enrolled in kinesiology. It was coach or bust. Did that go all the way through college? And that was always the mission?
I had a little blip on the radar about I think it was my sophomore, maybe my junior year, where I thought, I might want to make some money. And of course I had some friends that were in the business school. And So I took a hot minute to look at, maybe switching majors and doing some business stuff, but it didn't last more than a couple conversations. And thankfully, looking back to almost 30 years ago now, so thankful that didn't happen. And so, yeah, stuck the course and finished out my college career there. And then was fortunate enough to, stay on with Scott for a couple years there and coach collegiately while I was still competing, trying to, make sense of a professional track career for a couple years. And then I got a job at the local high school there in Greeley West High School was my first high school job. And so I got to stay close to home and kind of get that going. And that's where I started my family and whatnot. So that was kind of the next step in the profession.
What did you find the most difficult going from an athlete, specifically a decathlete, right? So you're kind of like I was almost going to say to be a good decathlete, but even just to be a decathlete, you've got to be a gym rat. Like you've got to always be doing something. You're throwing, knocking balls for javelin. You're throwing medicine balls for everything. You're running. You're jumping. It's 100 hours a day to just to be a decathlete, not even to be a great one, right? So as you move from decathlete, college student, etc., to now, okay, you're coach, like you're official. Now it's Coach Kula. There is no more Brian, right? It's Coach Kula. You're in charge of, you said high school, so you're in charge of 14 to 18-year-olds. What did you find the most difficult to make that switch from athlete to coach?
I think just my own natural competitiveness. And I, of course, I let that bleed out about 15 years of jumping into, all comer meets and coaches races and things like that. Cause I loved to compete. And I was probably pretty average talent wise, but I had a good work ethic and I could almost outcompete anybody that, lined up with me. And so that was hard to let go of, because I think I found it later in coaching where I could find that competitiveness with, I guess maybe coaching against the other coaches or competing with myself of trying to make the kids faster and whatnot. But that was probably the toughest transition for me, was just letting go of the, waking up on race day, jitters, butterflies, and then going and competing. I think I'm getting close to 50 and I still miss that sometimes. So you figure out different ways to channel it, but I think that was probably the biggest, I guess, transition. I did it pretty seamlessly. I kind of continued to train for another 8 to 10 years, just kind of recreationally and would jump in with the kids and workouts and stuff like that and found a little bit of that. But yeah, that's a tough transition for all athletes, I think.
Yeah, it's coming across very strong that, competitiveness, winning is maybe not winning, but the attempt at winning. Like I want to win. I obviously don't always win, but I want to, if I'm not going to win, it ain't going to be because I didn't do something, didn't focus on something, didn't try to outwork you. Right. So that's loud and clear. How do you, it's always fascinating with someone in that realm. We're fairly similar in that realm. Guys like us, not everybody's like us, right? Some people are participating specifically on the high school level. Some people are competing on their high school track team because of the social atmosphere. They want to be part of a team and they can't play football or whatever. I played football and I kind of sometimes wish I didn't. And when I wake up with my knee, right? But and some people are out there. I saw this on Twitter the other day. This kind of like, I haven't coached high school in 20 plus years. That tells you how old I am, right? But this kind of blew me away. Someone, I wish I could remember who it was. If this is you, hit me up on Twitter at Mike Cunningham and make sure I give you attribution for this. But they said that a kid, so as a high school coach, a kid came up and said, "Hey, I want to be on the track team, but I don't want to compete. I don't want to go to the meets." And that really blew me away because I was like, wait a minute. First of all, we're not a fitness class. What are you talking about? You want to be on the team but not compete? We're here to compete. But I didn't know that, and that was a thought process for people. Like, oh, I want to be, and no one does it for football that I know of, right? No one says I want to be on the football team, but you know what? Friday nights, I don't want to play. But so what I'm getting at here, sorry, Brian, I'm kind of all over the place on this one, but Brian, so as someone who, deeply values competition and trying hard and going for the victory, how did you deal with this? Is more macro, not necessarily specifically in your first coaching job here, but more macro here. How do you deal with, you have to have had athletes that were not that way and just, hey, I'm competing. If I do good, I do good, coach, but I'm not going to kill myself for it. How do you deal with that as a coach?
Yeah. I think it took years of maturity to reach a place to fully understand that and handle it and embrace it at some level. I think right out of the gates, I'd probably, love to go back to those first 5 classes that I coached and apologize. And, because I couldn't wrap my head around that. Like, I couldn't understand why a kid would miss a practice or, not want to compete in everything. So, you work through and you grow, and you get, your kids grow up, and you kind of start to be a little more mature as a person, and you start to realize that not every kid wants to be a champion, not every kid. And there's a ton of value in them just being on the team and training and, growing from the things that you're teaching that aren't necessarily going to make them a state champion, but, it's going to help them in their accounting class or in their marriage or, things like that. And so, I'm getting older now, and I would have never been able to say that, 15 years ago.
Yes.
But it's just, I think, that natural process of growth, and, even as a coach, and recognition of, every kid's valuable. And you can, they can improve not only on the track or in the field, but they, just as a human, just by being involved in your program. So I think, if I learned anything, it was that, every kid matters. And you can help them grow regardless of how talented they are.
Yeah, that's a big deal, Brian. I'm glad you said that out loud for everybody. If you heard that, hit the rewind button for about 30 seconds and listen to that again, because I understand, I was a coach, same thing. You want everybody to be the conference champ and go to nationals or go to state and be an all state, all American, things like that. But that's not everybody's path. Right. And that doesn't make their path wrong or incorrect. Right. In fact, if you can't, I like how you holistically, you're like, hey, you're here to make them better humans. And isn't our sport like perfect for that, by the way? I mean, our sport is the greatest example of tall, short, big, small, white, black, brown, that you can succeed. You can get better in track and field. There is an event for you. Absolutely. In this sport, right? So it's the greatest like backdrop of life that there is, than any other sport out there. Football might be the closest, but I still think track it has more of those opportunities, right? So I love how you verbalize that about, hey, I know it's my life. I love track and field and coaching 24/7, but I get that it might not be number one in your life. Your priority is a little different, but you have a spot on the team, and you have me as a coach. Like, I can still coach you to improve. That's highly valuable, Brian. I love it.
No doubt about it.
And I also think, and it's probably because it's personal for me as well, that I go back. You talked about your first 5 classes. You're like, man, if I could go back to them, like, I'm sorry, right? I do this. I'll run into, when I first started coaching high school early, I coached for 10 years. And the first 2 years were high school. Every once in a while, once a decade, I'll run into an old athlete, whether it's on Facebook or something like that. And literally the first thing I say is like, hey man, I just want to say, I'm sorry. Like, I'm not sure how you survived. I'm not sure how you actually improved. I guess it just proves that luck is part of it as well. But I am so sorry. So I love that, so I kind of think, like, if you're at some stage in your coaching career, I don't know if it's 10, 20 years, wherever it might be, but if you don't have that same thought of like, oh man, yeah, if I could go back, then you may not be improving the way you should be. So
I start every conference I speak at off with, like, man, no matter where you're at in your career, those first few years are, can be rough. And I mean, I look back and knowing what I know now and go, holy smokes, what was I doing? What was I thinking? How did we get a kid through a season without being injured or, getting better? And, it is what it is. And I think it's just evolution,
So how many years were you there at Greeley West?
I was at my high school career, went 5 years at Greeley West High School. And then I got a job in Denver at Littleton High School and was there for 7 years. And then Valor Christian High School opened here in Highlands Ranch. And I was there from 2008 until this past May. So 25 years to high school.
25 years of high school.
Yeah.
So that's, first of all, kudos. I love that. Before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about the difference between, and not the difference, but, talking about the stages, right, of coaching high school versus coaching college. But, I think you have maybe a greater opportunity, at least maybe volume wise, and even where they're at in their life, to affect young people's lives, right? You're dealing with 14 to 18 year olds versus 18 to 22, generalized there for college. So 25 years. What did you see? 25 years. So you see 2.5 decades of kids, right? So, I mean, you've got kids now that you coach that are I'm gonna call them full-fledged adults, man. They got
Absolutely.
careers, children,
Yeah.
families, etc. They've experienced heartache and successes in their their personal and private lives.
Yeah.
What have you seen, if anything, a difference between a kid 1995, a kid, an 18 or a 14-year-old freshman comes to join the team versus 2015, a 14-year-old freshman comes to do
Yeah.
has there been a difference?
That's a great question, actually. Haven't thought about it a ton that way, but I would say that, the first thing I would say is 14-year-old kids are still 14-year-old kids today. I think they're very similar. They have the same needs. They have the same issues. They have the same, stuff going on. I would say that society has changed enough over those years that I've been doing it that, there's certainly different pressures and, social media and mental health and, and all the things that we're seeing filter into that age group for sure. So I think there's a lot of pressure to do well and stuff like that. So, I mean, on one hand, I don't think a thing's changed for them. High school kids are high school kids. No matter where you're at. And I've been in many different demographics and areas of, at least in Colorado and seen a lot. And I got good friends that coach on the coasts, from North Carolina to California. And I've been around their programs and they're all the same. And we all have the same problems and issues and successes. But I do think that society's probably placed a little bit more visibility on, are you good or bad? Are you, acceptable and all that kind of stuff. So I think they deal with some stuff that if as a coach, you're not at least trying to build those kids up and shield them and shelter them and not protect them, but maybe arm them with the right kind of stuff. You may have a little bit bigger challenge on your hand.
My personality doesn't allow me to do this, but sometimes I want to respond back on Twitter when I see the tweets of like, today's kids are soft, or, back in the day, true grit and toughness was taught more than it is today. Because I don't know that that's true. I don't know that I believe that.
Yeah.
I think it's just different, right? Like, one of my favorite people in social media is a guy named Gary V, and he has this statement where this quote where he talks about we like to demonize the present and the future. We like to talk about Facebook is the end of the world and the end of face-to-face communication and cell phones and technology is going to ruin us all, and then uplift, put on a pedestal the past, like, when I grew up, or my dad's time, and it's the old walked up the hill both ways to school type of thing. But I don't know that that's true. I think, first of all, I'm glad I didn't grow up with social media. I'm glad I didn't grow up with someone being able to see everything I ever did. And then the flip side, I'm glad that I wasn't able to see what other people faked or real put out there.
Right.
I just don't know. So I like how you put that about, a 14-year-old kid then and now has a lot of the same pressures and stresses.
Yeah. They're more or less the same. But again, there's so many more opportunities. And, I look at like helping kids with college recruiting, over the last 5-7 years, and man, the way that they're able to see the country and the access that they have to things. I mean, I probably had a 40-mile radius bubble around my high school of schools I was looking at and, able to go visit and see and stuff. And so, a lot of that's changed. I think how kids are approaching life and stuff. And, of course, everyone needs a scholarship and has to be the best at what they do. And, parents spend a lot of money. I mean, heck, I'm in business with, for parents and clients that you want to spend money to reach their maximum potential. And those kind of environments just didn't exist a whole lot back in the 80s and 90s when I was, an athlete.
You talk about the environment there. Is the environment changed, or has the access to information changed? And what I mean by that, I'm going to ramble a little bit so you can think about that question.
Sure.
Is you talk about everybody wants a scholarship, things like that, and you didn't know much outside of, call it 100 miles from your house, right? Because you didn't have internet and things like that. Mm-hmm. But now we do have that. But did all those things still matter back then? Like if I only knew colleges in Colorado, if I grew up in Colorado, I only knew Northern Colorado, Colorado State, UC, and I'm probably missing Colorado Mesa, the billion other schools that are there. But did I wanted to earn a scholarship, but I didn't know about scholarship at Florida Gulf Coast Academy and Texas Pan America. So is the environment changed, or is it just more of the access to information?
Gosh, I think the answer is yes to both. I mean, I really do think that, because there's more access and information and knowledge, and, every kid that gets an offer, it gets blown out on social media. And so there becomes that like expectation or jealousy or comparison, going on. I mean, when I was in high school, I didn't know how good I was. I mean, honest to God,
Right.
I knew I could fare pretty well at our league and at the state track meet, but I didn't know where I fit in nationally or, and
Right.
kids nowadays, I mean, they click on mile split, they can know their national ranking in 12 seconds.
Right.
And so I think, yes, the environment's changed. I think because of that, it's caused like kind of expectations to be altered. And in some in great ways, not that it's all bad. I think social media gets a bad rap sometimes. It's a wonderful tool at some level. I've stayed connected with former athletes, and you see what's going on with other people. I think it enhances what you're doing as a business or a coach or whatever. So it's not all negative, but it certainly has. There are some negative components, just like anything.
Yeah, I love people that demonize social media because, and I've said this probably every episode, I'm a huge advocate of social media because I believe
Sure.
in communication and
Sure.
social. That first word is very big to me, social, right?
Yeah.
So, when everybody says it, kind of like you say, for people who think social media is good, they'll say, yeah, it's good, but it has its bad parts. Well, everything did, right? When we first got did you ever get a phone in your own room growing up?
Oh yeah,
I remember
sure.
that was a big deal, right?
Big deal.
I didn't have
Yeah.
to, it started with, the same lines. I had to yell at mom to get off
Right.
the phone so I could talk to, my girlfriend or whatever. And then it became my own line. Well, then you still had people, other, I'm gonna call them friends, other high school mates would call you and prank you. There was still bad
Yeah.
there, right? I mean, in text
Yeah.
messaging, there's bullying and stuff in text messaging. So everything
Sure.
has a bad component. The
Sure.
good news is if we focus on the good, I think that pushes back the bad. Hey, let's leverage 25 years of high school coaching against some college coaches. So there's a lot of college coaches that listen. We're probably about split 50-50 high school and college coaches with our listeners here. What have you seen different? Let's stay with the athlete first as the coach of the athlete. What have you seen different in that recruiting aspect? Whether it's, so we already talked a little bit about more information, right? So they know there's more programs out there that they don't have to, they're not limited to the 20 schools that are in Colorado. Like they could go all the way to New York and Maine and everywhere else has a track program, right? What else has changed from the kids and parents perspective recruiting over these 20 plus years?
Yeah, I think, in the sport, track and field specifically, it's changed in my mind a little bit of, it's taken a lot of any subjectivity that was out there whatsoever out of the game. A college coach would pull up the internet and get real results from many years of history and see trends and things like that, which in my mind, I coached collegiately, as a young buck, but had I ever been a college coach and done recruiting, I feel like your job gets a lot easier you still need to vet for, what's the kid going to turn into? What do the next 4 years look like? How high is their ceiling? Character, all those other things. But in a sport that's so, stopwatch and tape measure driven, it's pretty easy, I think, to at least filter down and then vice versa. It works good for the athletes too, because I think they can, not waste a bunch of time on schools that, hey, pull up the conference results in the, Pac-12 and find out what it took to make the hurdle final. And if you're 2 seconds off that, don't call those guys. They're probably not going to be very interested. So, I think it's probably helped streamline it a little bit, I would think, just that access to information. And then, for coaches, and I'm always really empathetic to college coaches. I can't imagine how much, I got some good buddies that they travel, they're gone 50 out of 52 weekends. And, to not have to get on an airplane and go, visit a kid and see them run or whatever, because you can pull up 4 years of data. Probably a great thing for coaches and families, life balance kind of stuff, where you can still get a good product, on the track and stuff like that. So
The next college coach I have on, I'm going to have to ask that because all I see is more recruiting traveling. What you talk about, you said that, and I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But I still see, they're going to every USA Juniors, Junior Olympics. They're going to all, state meets, and it's like, but when you said that, it's like, oh, that does make more sense. Like you do have more data there, and you have maybe better access to other, physical data, height, weight, etc., training age. maybe you don't have to see all of it, maybe in specific events, right? Like, so the 100-meter dash, well, that 100-meter dash is the same 100-meter dash as you're going to be in college. Maybe hurdlers and throwers because of height and technique. If you see a kid throwing, I don't know, 50 feet in the shot and they, they're terrible form, you're like, oh, okay, well, if I clean that kid up, they'd 60 feet or whatever. But yeah, it's interesting.
I'm sure there's still no substitute for seeing a kid live and, a home visit in a competitive situation to persuade a kid to come to your school.
Yeah.
I'm sure is still highly valuable. But I would just think on the initial vetting of, hey, where do we start? Class of 2027, where are we headed? I would think that you could at least get your list formulated, a little better than you might have been able to 20 years ago when you didn't know about, little so-and-so in podunk nowhere. So,
yeah, I think maybe that you hit it on the head there, as far as I think it's more of, that kid needs to see me. That kid needs to know, see, look, I'm at your state meet. Look, I'm also at your AAU regionals or whatever. Yeah. Where do you sit on? So I always enjoy, I kind of sit back and just eat popcorn and watch these discussions on social media. There's two like hot button topics when it comes to recruiting, and it feels like it's almost split 50-50. One of them is what's your feeling, Brian, on the kids and when they get an offer from a school, they put the graphic up now, or now you see, Brian Kula, my top 4 are probably Troy University and 3 other schools that are going to lose or whatever. That's where I went to school, Brian, so I'm always going to plug Troy University.
I like it.
What were you on that side of like kids having to tell everybody every time they get an offer or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because I'm probably getting to that part of my career. I'd call myself old school.
Are you the old man shaking your fist to get off my lawn?
Yeah,
is that where you're getting to? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was when you score a touchdown, you hand the football to the official and act like you've been there before. That's how I grew up. And so I think it would have been tough for me, to be blasting stuff out like that. But, you just have to kind of look at the environment that we're in. And, it's a competitive deal and kids are, trying to get additional offers or whatever. And it's there, the platform's there, and they're kind of following in everybody's footsteps. So, I mean, is it necessary? Probably not. But it's kind of the trend. And I mean, my kiddos went through it. I had a daughter that went and played college soccer, and my son's in a prep school right now for basketball. And so they're, I can see the value in them posting things and drawing some attention for other coaches or organizations and whatnot. So again, just another one of those things that have evolved, and I don't think it's all bad. There's probably some in there of, hopefully people are still speaking into them of humility and, things like that as well. But, it's not all bad.
I never thought about, I don't put my mind in the 18-year-old head brain space there. I never thought about the like, oh, this is going to help me leverage to get other offers. Yeah. Maybe there's a dream school that just hasn't offered yet. Maybe if I showed them, I never thought about that aspect. And the track one always kind of gets me because, we do a lot of chopping up of scholarships. So it's like,
right.
Like, because it's the opposite for me when I see a news article about, Jimmy signed a full scholarship for football to Troy University. And I'm always like, yeah, it's only full. Like, you don't need to say full. Like,
right.
It wasn't like some kid also got a 50%. And so Johnny's better because he got 100.
Yeah.
It's all full. So on the track side, I'm always like, when they're like, yeah, thank you for, I'm so proud to announce I got offered by XYZ. And it's like, books. It could be books.
Paying for books and fees. Yeah.
It'd be books. I don't know. But so you mentioned your daughter is playing or did play collegiate soccer.
Yeah, she just finished up a career. Yeah. She had a semester to play and banged up her knee again. So she's having a kind of a career-ending knee surgery this week.
Oh man, that's tough. Dang it. Did she go to Northern Colorado?
She went to John Brown University down in Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
Played down
that's
there
great school.
NAIA school. Had a great career.
That's awesome. So did she, when she was going through, so that's not 4 or 5 years ago that we still had Twitter and Instagram and everything.
Yeah.
Did she post, I got an offer from John Brown, I got an offer from Northern Colorado, wherever? Did she post all that?
She did. Yeah. It was, it's kind of the thing that kids do nowadays. And she didn't really shop around too much. She was injured in high school, which kind of limited some opportunities. And so John Brown stuck with her and that was kind of going to be her choice kind of exclusively. So it wasn't as big of a show. But she was excited to share, and then I think too, it works conversely with the school itself. I mean, the school wants to be excited about signing a top athlete. And so they are going to encourage the kid and retweet and, do all the things to draw attention to their program too. So it's, at the end of the day, I mean, even though the kid might be doing a little self-marketing, it's a marketing tool for the university and things like that. So, fair. I'm a business guy, so I get that.
Exactly. Okay, so that's one topic on recruiting. Here's the other hot button. Seems to be 50-50 split down the middle. Still talking about recruiting here. So a kid goes on a recruiting visit, and now a very cool thing, very hip traditional thing, and that probably started with football, and it's definitely gone down to track and field. I'm not sure if other sports have it as well, but when you get there, you put on the school's jersey, uniform, and you take pictures. So this is a hot topic, right? There's 50% of the coaches are like, help them envision being on the team, and help them feel like they're part of the team already, and it's social media cloud, etc. Blah blah blah. The other half are very vehemently opposed to it. That it's a privilege to wear my program's jersey. You will not get that unless you choose us and make the team.
Sure.
Where do you sit there, man? Yeah.
Boy, I mean, having worked with high school kids for 25 plus years, I'd be a fan of it. I mean, as a college coach, I mean, heck, a kid will do anything for a t-shirt, and I'm just saying they love gear. I think we've seen that trend, just change the landscape of college sports, is how many uniforms does your football team have? How many different singlets does your track team have? And so, I mean, when I went with my son for a couple of college basketball visits, the one school that really stood out for him in a little swing of about 4 visits was the school that had the uniform in the locker room for him to put on and did a little photo shoot. And, I got to watch it make a big impact on my son. And so I think it's a neat deal for the kids, and a chance for the university to show off what they're providing. And you can always sit back and argue, and I understand where those other coaches are coming from of, I hope our program is more than our uniforms, and I actually worked with a coach at my last high school that was really good about, perspective on what's important. And, obviously people and coaches and kids are way more important than any uniform you'll ever put on. But there is still the kid that I want to look good to play good, kind of a mentality. And that's a big deal nowadays. So I'd probably say that and being kind of a gear guy myself, I probably fall a fan of that side of things.
You said a kid will do anything for a t-shirt. If you follow me on Twitter, I also am a big fan of that. Absolutely.
So give your size, we'll get you a t-shirt.
Absolutely, man. Hey, look at me. I'm extra large all day, baby. Come on now. One of my favorite things to do is go to the gym in the mornings, and whatever shirt I'm wearing the day, just to give that school a shout out, man. And I love it like all the way. Like I certainly enjoy wearing my Oregon shirt. We're so blessed to, have been chosen for Oregon's new facility. But you know what? I get a kick out of wearing Summer Creek High School and Virginia Wesleyan University. That's just because to me, it's not about the simple. It's not about whether you're at a big school, Power 5, et cetera. It's about, do you affect kids in a positive manner in this great sport? And so I'm going to rep you if you do, man. I love it. It's interesting about the uniform thing. I don't know, when I was at Mississippi State, it hadn't reached, I stopped coaching in 2005. It hadn't reached that part yet. Like Facebook had just come out, right? So there wasn't social media, really, thank God for that. I don't know how I would have felt. Like I see both sides of it. And I also see I'm a big loyalty guy. So like if you go, let's use USC and UCLA, right? 2 big rivals. So let's say you go on official visits for both of those schools and you take pictures wearing both those uniforms and you choose one of them. Still out there in the Twitterverse, if you will, is a picture of you and your rivals.
That's right.
That's just like, did you hear about so I'm a big SEC guy, right? Growing up in Alabama and such. There was a kid who I might get it backwards. I think he got a Roll Tide tattoo in high school, grew up an Alabama fan, and then signed with Auburn.
Ooh, it's blasphemy.
Right? I was like, wow, how did he get accepted by his teammate? You've got Roll Tide. There is no bigger rival. You got a Roll Tide tattoo. Like, dude.
Yeah.
Like
somebody needed a little better advisement of that young man in high school.
Yeah. Like I talk about a picture out there, you got a tattoo that ain't going, did he cover it up every day? I mean, that just seems like there's like, as a recruit, I'd be like, I gotta be a little careful. Like maybe I take a picture everywhere I go with my visits, but I only publish whichever one I end up deciding on, man.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal. And I mean, I got to live through that a little bit being at the last high school I was at. We had some pretty prominent football players and, went on NFL guys and things like that. And so you see, on those official visits and they just get decked out and they'll deck out their little brothers and they'll, mom and dad. And it's just, it's that, it's a total marketing ploy and probably pretty effective, with that demographic.
Right.
If it's me and you, we're probably seeing through that going, yeah, okay, you got cool t-shirts, but man, your coaches aren't very, kind to your kids or, whatever you're seeing a hole in. A t-shirt or a nice uniform isn't going to make up for that. So, but kids sometimes often can't see past that,
hindsight's 2020, right? At our age, we have the one thing you can't force, and that's experience, right? We've had those guys that are like, you look really good, but behind that mask, man, it ain't good, right? We've had that experience. So again, leveraging your 20 plus years of high school coaching, I don't want to say necessarily what have you seen changing from college coaches recruiting the different athletes you've had along the way, but maybe turn it around and say, what advice would you give college coaches? What are you seeing, not naming any names, Brian, okay? But what are you seeing college coaches maybe doing in the recruiting of high school athletes, specifically in your experience, that you're just like, hey man, you guys gotta cut this out, or you need to change X, Y, and Z? How can we help coaches maybe do that part of their job a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, I think they do a phenomenal job. It's been incredible, and I've been so blessed to have some really high end athletes and got to see some of that processing of top national kids like Mary Beth Sant, Anna Hall, Cole Sprout, just to name a few that I was fortunate enough to be around during their recruiting process. And so you see coaches and some of them do it really well. And I'd say most of them do it really well. Some of them have a little different approach to things. And maybe they lean on facilities, uniforms, history, stuff like that. I think the coaches that impress me the most, that I would hope that all of them would be, was that they would show who they are as people and their character and, how they're going to take care of the kid. And, because I don't know, I guess I'm just a coach that really dives deep with the kids relationally and, feel like that's a huge component to success. And so I love it when I see a coach kind of open up of, how their team is like a family and, they're going to be taken care of in all facets of life, not just on the track. And I think, they're really good ones that are out there. You definitely see that because they have success on the track, and that happens more than just, fast kids. Typically they're pretty tightly connected, and those kids run through a brick wall for them.
What's your opinion on, boy, I just lost my train of thought there. Sorry. Let's ask a different one. So, this maybe I had a better question. Maybe the last one wasn't that good. I see a lot of times, and I don't know if it's more of that, maybe I'd call it virtue signaling, but I've seen coaches, and I don't know that I've necessarily seen on the track side. Maybe I have, but definitely basketball, football, I see it. I'll see a post out there that says, hey, was recruiting the number one kid in Colorado. They probably don't get that specific, but, recruiting the top recruit, and I saw their social media, and so I stopped recruiting. Does that actually happen in track and field? What I mean by that is, if I'm recruiting I'm going to go extreme here, a 10 flat 100 meter guy, and I see it also depends on the post. Sure. Let's say it's a bad post, but not, he ain't murdering someone, but it's a bad post. I don't know that when I was a coach that I really would be like, hey man, we're just going to stop recruiting you here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of it is, I feel like I'm the kind of coach that, you got to have a bar of excellence that you're reaching for in regards to your character standards. But I also think too, that I'm a big second chance guy. And, when you're dealing with, young high school aged kids, man, they're going to make mistakes. Like you said earlier, I'm thankful there was no social media when I was growing up. I'm sure there's things that I, would have done that would have embarrassed myself or my family. And
I like how you said, I like how you said, I'm sure there were. And the reality is, I know I did, some ththings that I'm so glad nobody got to see on social media. Yeah,
No, there's no question.
yeah,
So, you try to be graceful and
yeah.
know that, gosh, we've all been given second chances and, have a grace-filled life. So you want to be able to pass that on to other, to young kids that are maybe making mistakes and stuff, and give that an opportunity. So, I mean, yeah. And I'm sure it's really hard in that situation. If you got a kid that's going to be a national qualifier, that made a hiccup, then you have to weigh out are you bringing them in for the right reasons? Can you bring them in and maybe help them through that? And they're going to score you points at the conference meet and things like that. So,
Yeah, I don't think it's hard at all. I think you still sign that kid
yeah.
for more than one reason, right? One is you're exactly right. Like, we're dealing with 18-year-old individuals. Their brains aren't even fully formed at this point. So, give them a second. And you know what, honestly, maybe they need a third, fourth, fifth chance. My hand's raised here. I needed more than
Yeah.
one second chance here, right? And then the other side of it is, if you are, as their track coach and your environment around, so your academic advisor, your athletic trainer, the whole environment of your facility, if you're filled with a bunch of leaders, well, maybe that's exactly what that young kid needs. Maybe that, they're not in a great situation and they need to see how to act on a daily basis, social media wise, adult to adult, et cetera. So maybe you're the exact person they need,
Yeah.
and not to just cut them loose like maybe a lot of people in their lives have in the past.
Well, and that was going to be the other component to that is, does all that blame fall on the kid, or does that kid, is he growing up in a tough situation? Does he not have a coach in his life that's been a positive role model? I mean, there's all kinds of things I see. I got a good friend of mine out in California, JT Ayers at Trabuco Hills High School, who's just a phenomenal human. And I've got to be around him and his program. And, there's not a guy that cares more about kids or accountability or, a good Christian upbringing for, who he's working with. And so I don't think you're going to, if a kid comes out of that program, you probably don't have to worry about, any of that stuff happening. But a lot of kids don't get the blessing of being under a program like that. So probably have to take a bigger look and, hope that you can have some influence on that kid if you got him in your program to, keep him on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, and shout out, you mentioned JT Ayers. What a great guy. I can't wait to meet him in person one day. I feel like we know each other. We're friends because of social media, honestly.
Yeah.
And he also, he is the host of a great podcast. It's called the On Track and Field podcast. I think he publishes on Tuesdays, I believe. But if you like track, he's got great guests on there. And I think he's running, I think it's still going to be running by the time you're listening to this. He's running the TFC, the Track and Football Consortium, I think it is. Tony Holler, I think, is involved in that. I think he's interviewing like everybody who's on that's speaking at that. So what a great series.
Right.
They do a lot more of the X's and O's. We don't really talk about X's and O's here, but if you're a podcast listener, go check out On Track and Field podcast hosted by JT Ayers, man. It's a great show. So I remember my question that I blanked on.
Okay.
What's your thoughts on coaches, college coaches recruiting high school athletes? Pretty typical. They're going to talk to the athlete. It's like 100%, right? They got to talk to the athlete to recruit them. They're probably going to talk to the parents or guardians. That's probably pretty standard.
Yep.
I don't know that it's split 50-50, but there is some back and forth on, do you actually talk to the coach about the athlete? Some don't. I'll admit I didn't. If I talked to the coach, it was more about like, hey, I need contact information, because I was pre-internet, so I was still trying to find people. Now it's easier, I should say.
Yeah.
So I didn't, but there's other people that say, hey, would tell me to my face, what a mistake. You better be talking to the track coach. What's your thought? And maybe maybe it's not a great, because you're a high school coach. Maybe you're like, yeah, hell yeah, they need to be talking to me every time.
I think that's a little bit of a loaded question, because I mean, you would think that, yes, you'd want to talk to their high school coach, but I would imagine, there's probably a certain percentage of coaches out there that, maybe a college coach wouldn't necessarily trust like all the information or, the experience level, or, if you got some, I don't know, guy that's just kind of padding his PERA and coaching, on the side. I don't know if that's the best guy to advocate for the kid. you might steer clear. So a little bit of it's probably just having some background knowledge of who's coaching. And, I would hope that I would have been a coach, because I know I talked to many college coaches, not just about my own kids, but kids in our area from our state, they'd want an opinion on, from me. But that took a lot of years of experience and, relationships and things like that to get there. So I could see where some college coaches probably don't want to hear from maybe some, coach that doesn't exactly know what they're doing. So
Yeah,
I don't know. I can see where it would be split a little bit.
I kind of, on that first part you said there, if I'm going to call a coach, do I really expect the coach to tell me, hey, you know what, little Johnny, we struggle with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Not only because of your own ego, right? And, we've talked before, ego is not necessarily a bad thing. Ego can be bad, but ego is not bad, right? That's pride and, taking pride in the work that you do. But if the coach tells me, like, little Johnny does, misses practices and it's always late for the bus, I start going, well, why is little Johnny still on your team then? Wait, I would start turning like, well, coach, talk to me about your program. Well, how do you run discipline and accountability? Like I start, it's like I'm counseling the coach instead of the athlete. Like, wait a minute,
right.
Maybe little Johnny just needs guidelines here and you're not providing them.
Sure. Well, you got to be, as a high school coach, I always felt like you had to be able to put your ego aside a little bit. It's always a feather in your hat to have a kid go to, the University of Georgia and run track or, whatever. But boy, if you oversell a kid and, maybe don't disclose everything, and then they get to that university and then all of a sudden you've damaged a relationship that, whether it's another kid down the road or just a future opportunity or just, we're all track coaches. We love the sport. It's not none of us are getting rich or famous from it. And so I think it's a little bit of taking care of each other, making sure that you're getting accurate information.
So let's go back to your actual coaching, Brian. I appreciate your experience.
Sure.
25 years on the high school level, man, that's a big deal. You've seen many, many kids go on to colleges, big and small, right? And I think that's just so important to be able to leverage that experience that you have to help others. Our two goals here, I told you, one is always, to uplift and honor our guest, you here today, about what you've gone through in this amazing journey in this profession, and then also to provide value for listeners, right? People listen.
Sure.
There's a high school coach in small town Georgia right now that's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm just starting out. Like I just finished school at Georgia Tech and now I'm the head coach of such and such high school. Wait a minute, Brian's got some good ideas here. I should leverage this. So it's always great to be able to leverage that experience, man. I appreciate that very much. So as you are going through 25 years of coaching and really, fundamental coaching, right? A freshman that shows up and they don't even know what pole vaulting is. And you think, man, you should be a pole vaulter. So I'm going to coach you pole vaulting. What did you do? You had a great base with Dad and Scott Hall and other, coaches that you've had. What did you do coaching education wise, professional development, to continue perfecting your craft?
Yeah. I was blessed to be a decathlete, right? And so I felt like I could coach any event right out of the gates going into college, coming out of college into my first coaching job. And that was huge. And then I'd say probably the second most valuable thing was trial by fire. Just being, I've never been an assistant track coach. I was a head track coach at age 23. And I had to figure everything out, sometimes the hard way. I had some great mentors. Mark Rogie at Greeley West High School was a phenomenal guy that had done it for many years before me. And then of course my dad and Scott, and, I got to see some of that stuff, but a lot of mistakes made and, just kind of figuring it out as I went along. And then I think the coach education wise, there's so many good programs out there and people that offer, training opportunities and podcasts and things that you can get access to now. My most valuable experiences were reaching out to individuals that I admired, that I thought that I saw from, I guess just from a young age. I would point out somebody and say, that guy's doing it really well. Whether they're state champions every year or the way their kids would compete or run, or, you would just see trends of different individuals. You go, hey, that Tim McIntyre down at Longmont High School, those kids are freaking good every year. And I don't see, just freak shows walking out of the sticks. These kids have been developed. And so I'm going to get in the car. I'm going to drive down to Longmont, take him out for a cup of coffee and ask him how he does things, and I did that quite frequently from age 23 to age probably 28. And it wasn't just local. I mean, it was, I got relationships with, people all over, and I just wasn't afraid to pick up the phone and ask questions. And I think similar to me now, jumping on a podcast with you or being involved with Tony Holler's group and stuff like that is, being able to talk to coaches and give those young coaches some advice of what direction to head, because people did that for me, and I really felt like I got to, mold and model my programming and stuff. I mean, I always say I don't really have an original thought in my entire program, but I was very fortunate to, have some people and maybe in the Colorado community, because my dad was such kind of a prominent figure, and, they knew little Brian Kula was Murray's son. And, I got to have access maybe to more guys, or
Sure.
maybe I just ran across great people that were willing to share information and stuff. And, I mean, I got to be one of the very few coaches to ever go sit in on Tony Wells' practices in downtown Denver,
Wow.
and it was nothing more than me just being bold and saying, "Hey, where do you practice? I'd love to come watch you. Your kids kick the dog tar out of every kid every year. So you're doing something really well." And, some of that's just that, I guess, a little bit of humility of going, I don't know how to do it perfectly. I want to get better. So let me come watch you do it. And I think my whole system, my whole program, my business model is based around, tidbits from 15, 20 different really high level coaches that I just pilfered, information from over the years, and then formulated my own thoughts around. So,
You mentioned a real legend that I'm not sure, I'm going to say a lot of people know about, and that's
yeah.
Tony Wells. He was born too early. He needed podcast and social media. I think of, like, when you say Tony Wells, I remember some of the great athletes that set, high school 60-meter national records and 100-meter records. And I think of Carol Smith Gilbert, who was a Tony Wells protege. I mean, what a not only an amazing coach, but also someone who, before internet, social, all this kind of, access to information, like we've been talking about, really affected a lot of other coaches. Like, there is a tree out there. I'm blanking. Carol again is in my head.
Curtis Taylor up at Oregon.
Yeah, Curtis
Carol.
Taylor. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, their coaching model, I mean, he even had effect on some of the stuff Clyde Hart did back. I mean, people don't realize that, but he had a lot of effect on a lot of different coaches and athletes.
Yeah. I can't remember if Tony came to our camp at Chula Vista or if I saw a video. It would have been a VHS.
Yeah, sure.
But I remember the way he taught. There was something real specific about, it's one thing to tell a kid something, right? But sometimes kids learn better by sound. And so he would clap out, or I think he actually made them say the word beep. So they would do their acceleration, beep, 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 that kind of thing. And that like something like I started coaching it that way. Like, I started like using clap. I think clap is how I would do it. But just so like, hey, you need to understand pushing through the acceleration and getting to the max velocity. Like, here's another way to maybe help you understand that. Like, that's why I talk about when, a coach is at middle of nowhere, big school, Power 5, NAIA, it doesn't matter, that you can affect people, and you may never know. I guarantee you, Tony Wells, I never got the opportunity to meet Tony Wells. So Tony Wells has no idea that he helped my coaching career.
Right.
And more than likely someone came to see me coach, or, I would mentor someone when I was coaching. I probably passed that along to them, kind of your idea of like, there is no original thought. I love that, by the way. As long as you're always thinking, there is no original thought, right? Like,
That's right.
That feels like some Kaba Tolbert. Kaba, that might be a quote for you, man. That sounds like that was some Yoda stuff right there, man. As long as you're always thinking, there's no original thought. Oof. I got to make sure Kaba knows about that one. That was a good one. The effect that you have is exponential. If you're positive with what you're doing on your coaching, your effect is exponential. You'll never be able to calculate the thousands of people, not just in track and field, but here we're talking specifically track and field. That's awesome.
Tony might have been the best track coach that no one ever really knew about.
Right.
I mean, he chose to stay in the club youth, world. But man, did he develop some unbelievable athletes, and some of his training principles, I fell in love with, because a lot of them aligned with what my dad did back in the
Mm.
80s. He was a big like Russian, Eastern European model, type of power output
Mhm.
stuff, and speed, was marquee. And so, I mean, and that's where I'm at today. I mean, the way I train kids today was very much impacted by how Tony trains kids. And, and he stuck with his system for 30, 40 years, never faltered. There was never a volume ad or tempo runs. I mean, that guy stuck with speed and power and
Yeah.
created. I remember he used to have a Letterman's jacket, and on the back of it, he had embroidered every time a kid broke a national record in his club program. And that thing was covered on the entire back of national records. So, I mean, he was doing something right. And again, the reason I bring that up was just, you asked about education. And I mean, the 5 or 6 practices that I went and sat in and listened and talked to and tried to understand what they were doing and stuff was, 100 times more valuable than I could have ever bought a book or gone to a clinic on. So, I really was, I would say, kind of sort of self-educated,
Yeah.
through just reaching out and watching how, and up until the last year of my high school coaching career, I was still reaching out to Vince Anderson and Dan Paff, and talking to guys, Ralph Jones and my buddy of mine out in North Carolina, and guys that just do things really well and say, well, I'm second guessing myself here a little bit. I don't know if this is perfect for this, and your environment changes, and we're a cold weather state, so you can't do the same things as old JT does out there in sunny California. And so you're just always hopefully continuing to educate and learn. And I think that's critical for education.
You talked about maybe second guessing yourself on some training things, and we don't talk training. So, but think of the other aspect though, Brian, through 25 years of coaching high school, being a head coach at, what is it, 3 different stops.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you looking back now, again, that's, it's so valuable, right? The experience, you can't force it. So you lived 25 years. Looking back at it now, was there anything that you second guessed yourself on how you ran the program? I'm thinking of things like, there's discussions around, should I have captains on my team? There's discussions around that, the whole team should warm up together and then the distance kids go off, things like that, bus rides, what meets you went to or didn't go to, et cetera. Anything that you look back, you're like, yeah, you know what, I wish I could have done a little bit better job of?
Yeah. Again, I think that's that whole evolution piece. I feel like we kind of found a really good formula over the last probably 10 or so years. And, we trained different ways at different schools and over different periods of time. And, the common denominator is, I've found is typically not the training program necessarily. It's probably more of, the culture of your program and the relationships you have with kids. And, I give the example, I know we don't talk training, but in 2009, we were a high volume program. Just, I'll leave it at that. And we won the boys and girls state 5A championships. And then fast forward maybe 8 years to Valor Christian High School, and we were a 100% speed power output, no tempo, no volume whatsoever, and won the boys and girls 5A state championship. And so, when you ask about, would we do things different? Yeah, I'd love to go back, 23 years and start over with, kind of where we ended things, of, honoring every kid. And, I was fortunate to be at a Christian school the last 12 years and to have that be a part of who we were, of, raising kids up spiritually and relationally. And I think that makes a big difference in, how you can have even the success that you're looking for on a track. So, would I do things a little different that way? Yes. But I don't regret, hardly anything. I think I always put the kids first. I never really concerned myself too much about other programs or what everyone else was doing. I was going to try to take care of the kids that I was, entrusted with, and work hard for them and create great opportunities for them. And so I did the best I could when I was 23, probably missed the mark a few times. And then got to a pretty good place by the time I was 48.
Speaking of culture, and I'm gonna put you on the spot, so I'm gonna ask the question and then give you some time to think about it.
Sure.
What are some unique things that you did for the athletes for culture? And I'm not talking about training, of course, here. And maybe I'll give you an example as you're starting to kind of think, so I can help guide you to where I'm trying to go with this.
Sure.
I saw this really cool. I don't know what school does this. I think there's several schools now. They'll take they call it the PR plate, right? Or, they'll, like, maybe a kid has jumped 1811 and they're goal is 19 feet in the long jump. And so they'll have a plate that says 19 foot or whatever. And so when they break the PR, they physically break like it's a big deal to like shatter the plate. Right. I thought that was so cool.
That is
In
cool.
football, something that started out kind of that same avenue was the turnover chain at Miami. Like now look at that. It's everywhere. It's overdone now, by the way. There's some not so unique things going on out there. But so did you do anything as we, again, just trying to leverage your experience and try to think of how can I drive culture into my program? Anything that you guys did unique wise for the athletes in that kind of realm?
Yeah. In 25 years, I probably missed the mark on some of that kind of stuff. And I look at my buddy JT out in California, and he does such a great job with team culture and some really cool traditions and things like that. I'd say my best traditions came out of my time at Valor, where we would actually baptize kids, which is not exactly, track and field related, but it was a huge part of our program and who we were.
Sure.
We would do fun stuff like, I guess I can disclose this now as I've retired, but we'd always run with gold batons. And our school colors were blue and, baby blue and navy blue. And we ran with gold batons because it signified first place.
Right. Yeah.
We ran to win, and relays were a really big deal to our team and our program. And it was a big deal if you could make the 4x4 or the 4x1 team. And, so I think we did a pretty good job of expectation and culture and, a bar of excellence. And it wasn't acceptable to lose a 4x4 relay. Didn't matter if it was a tiny little invitational or the state championships, man, we were going after that sucker. So I think we had some things culture wise, we had a top 5 list that we kept very accurately from the time I opened up the doors at Valor. And that was a big deal. Our school records at Valor would rival a lot of schools in the nation, only being, 12, 13 years old. We had some unbelievable marks, 11:37 in the 100 meters for the girls.
Wow.
We had Anna Hall jump 6 feet in the high jump. And so just, a lot of success. And so to get on the top 5 was kind of a big deal. We didn't even have a school record board because we were such a new school. Had we put it up, at year 5, we would have probably redefined the thing 3 times over. So, but we did keep pretty accurate tabs on that. We'd always honor that at the end of the year and things like that. But JT has some great ideas and does some really cool things in regards to, I like the idea about, actually physically breaking a record. That's kind of cool. And I don't know, ours, we took a ton of pride in, team successes, league championships, state championships, things like that. And we'd get our kids to rally around that stuff.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like, maybe cross country is one of the greatest examples of where they do like the 1,000-mile over the summer shirts and stuff like, the 1,000-mile club and stuff. That's just like that kind of stuff. That's really cool. I love school record boards for multiple reasons, not just because, you see Valor Christian, you're like, oh my God, their school record's 11:37 for the girls 100. That's amazing. But I like seeing like where I'm gonna say the gaps are, like, you'll see great sprint school, then you'll see, school records 5 minutes for the mile for the boys. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, what's happening there?
Yeah, for sure.
Then if like if a really good kid came from a school and they don't hold the school record for whatever reason. So I was at Montana, I'm going to get it wrong. It's either Montana or Montana State. I'm going to go with oh man, he's going to get mad at me. Lance Deal went to school at either Montana or Montana State. Montana State. I'm going to go with that one. Yeah. And so I went and visited the school about 5-6 years ago, and they had the school record. And I was like, oh, it's Lance Deal, American record holder in the hammer. Yeah. He's got the hammer school record, and he didn't. And I was like, and it wasn't like the school record was like 1 billion feet. It was pretty pedestrian. I was like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. He did have the discus school record. And then I dug into it and actually had him on the podcast way back in the day. Go back and listen to Lance Deal's podcast. It was amazing. He's an amazing human being. He's actually, if I remember correctly, 6th on the hammer list at college. And I love that because that means he wasn't all that great.
Right.
But he decided, and again, you got to go listen to the podcast. If you Google Lance Deal Gill podcast, it'll bring it up for you, or in your podcast app, I guess, search there for it. But that means, and he tells the story amazingly, he wasn't all that great, but he felt like he could be great. And so he decided, I'm going to go all in for a set amount of time. If he said a year or 2 years, he moved to Oregon and trained with All the throws coaches are mad at me right now because cannot think of the very famous, very awesome coach that was up at Oregon. But he went up to him, slept on his couch, and was like, make or break. I'm either going to do it or I'll go back to the real world, right? And he becomes the American record holder, medalist in the Olympic. I love that. So I love school record boards for that reason. Just like they tell a story that is just
Sure.
fascinating to me. Fascinating.
Sure.
What about culture with your staff? So you've been a head coach. You were a head coach at 23. I almost said I couldn't imagine that, but I beat you. I was a head coach at 20. I should not have been the head coach at 20. That's part of my kids. Like, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. But you've got, but you've developed, right? From 23 to call it 45, you've developed as a head coach. What did you do culturally for your assistant coaches in regards to their development? Did you keep them, underneath your thumb? They'll never be head coaches because they're going to be here and be the best assistant coach for me. Were you more of a blessings coach? Like, hey, I want you to become a head coach one day if that's in your story. How are you with your staff?
Dear Lord, I hope none of my staff, present or past, is listening to this right now. They'd be destroying me. Again, probably in the evolution of, being a head coach, probably did a pretty poor job early on of, and I think probably throughout my career, was a pretty good micromanager, having expectations and, here's how I think it should go. And, my experiences being fairly well-rounded across all the events, gave me some pretty strong opinions on how things were supposed to go. But I think the older I got, I kind of realized a little bit of, you have to empower your coaches. They have to feel like they're having an impact. And obviously you have to be the buck stops here guy sometimes. And if things aren't excellent, then you have to be able to address those things. But I think, empowering them and then giving them some reins and letting them, feel some success with the athletes that they're training and coaching is a huge deal. I also think that having some camaraderie amongst your coaching staff is a huge deal as well. And I know for the last maybe 10, 12 years of my career, I was very intentional with, off the track get-togethers. Let's travel, as a team. We'd like you to come with us when we travel, kind of an environment, just to, know each other aside from, the X's and O's of what's going on at practice every day. So when you have that, it's the same thing with the kids. The whole reason I used to start 1996, 97, I trekked 20 plus kids in a van across the country to California to run at a track meet. And I remember my AD questioning, like, why are we going to California for a track meet? There's plenty of track meets around here. And my whole intent of the deal was just to get to know the kids off the track, see them in a van for 14 hours, be around them at dinner in a hotel and stuff like that. And then just, the memories and the trust that they gain in each other in situations. And so I think staff wise, team wise, those are really important components to a culture of, it's not just from 3 to 5 every day.
How did you handle, you talked about your own development of coaching, long to short and things like that. Did you ever have a situation where an assistant coach was like, hey coach, you're not doing any tempo runs. Our sprinters, come on. Like where I went to school, we had to do repeat miles or whatever. That's probably a true story out there.
Yeah.
It's not good. Don't do that. Did you ever have that kind of, I'm going to call it a conflict, but like a difference in opinions in training? And how did you handle that?
Yeah, I think I probably over the years had a couple of those. I think that, I've spent an inordinate amount of time being able to explain our system and why we do it. So I'm very proactive on the front end of, guys, here's how we do things. Here's why we do things. If you have questions, let's talk them through. I think probably 95% of the time that just resonated with coaches. They understood it. They bought into it. Every now and again, you'd have, one maybe that didn't totally align. And I think, probably fortunately for me, we either had natural segues where that coach would just, leave the next year or whatever. I don't really feel like I ever had to, dismiss anybody or have sit down conversations. And so really tried to run my high school program over the years like a college program where I'd empower, the distance coach would take all the distance kids and we'd see them on Saturdays. I wouldn't see them much during the week, and same with our throwers. And so we didn't, all show up at 3 o'clock and run a lap together. And like a maybe more of a traditional high school program, we really ran it to where I felt like it was the best situation for the kids training wise, getting to know their coach. It was important for me to know the throwers and the distance kids as the head coach, but they needed to be intimate with who was leading in them. And they had their own little subculture within, our team culture. And I think it worked out pretty well for us.
So I think what, bringing it up to present, Brian, what you're doing now, running your own business, like that is one of the most, like I have so much admiration for that. Like, I look at our owner here at Gill Athletics, I'm like, man, you just must not sleep at night. Like, I know I'm worried about some things, but you own the joint, man. Like that's so risky, right?
Yeah.
So I just have so much admiration, the courage and guts that you have to have for that. And I know from talking to coaches around the country, a lot of people wish and want to do what you do. Maybe not necessarily a performance center, which although that runs hand in hand with like track coaching, but they want to, get out of coaching. They almost feel trapped, like, oh, I make so much money now, or, I don't know what else could I do. How does this experience of, 30 plus years now, right? So not only all your coaching, post collegiate practice and competing, but your collegiate career, growing up as a coach's kid, how does that all wrap up and has helped you, take that leap of faith and own your own, start your own business and grow your own business?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple buckets there. And one of them, I know you and I had talked about the indoor track that we're building as part of a foundation that I'm working for. And it goes hand in hand because there's an opportunity there as a kind of the chief operations officer in that foundation to, set into motion an indoor track facility that we're building here in Denver. We're hoping it's going to be the fastest track in the world. We got the guys from Mondo working on the design, and, the buildings, we could be 14, 18 months away from, breaking ground and getting that thing going. So that coupled with, having a sports performance facility going, I guess the two of them together kind of gave me the confidence to jump in. And, I had a little bit of flexibility that way, and had kind of run a long career as a coach. It was scary, I'm not going to lie, but fortunately, the foundation was very good to me in regards to, employment. And that gave me a little bit of flexibility on, hey, we're going to start our business. And really, I mean, of all the bad things that came out of the lockdown, pandemic, that was a time where I really kind of took my business from, that's kind of a side get hustle to, we're going to do this full time. Everyone was locked in their houses. I was grinding 12, 14-hour days at the park and at a local facility here that had some medical clearance. And so we were able to continue to train some of the pro athletes, and we grew into some high school kids and whatnot. And so we were able to kind of hit the ground running. It's not like we just opened our doors and said, hey, please come here. I was working probably 3 or 4 different jobs for, basically 2020 of, trying to figure out, okay, we want to build this indoor track. I'm running a sports performance business. I'm still the head track coach at Valor Christian, and, and something was going to have to give. And so there's a lot of prayerful decisions around, what's next, and just really, I guess, enjoyed the pursuit of a business opportunity. And yeah, it takes some fortitude, that's for sure. And there's been some sleepless nights. There's no doubt about it. But I think the vision of what we're trying to do with the big track presence here in Denver, and then with what I wanted to do with my sports performance thing, and God's just blessed the whole thing. So I've just really been kind of the hands and the feet, and try not screw it up,
Yeah, there's been some really big businesses that have come out of really down economic times. Think of Netflix. They started around 07, 08 when the big housing crash. They came up, right, and look what they are now. Right. Do you remember the last pandemic we had? The flu of 1918. Remember that one?
I'm old, but I don't remember it.
Well, it was 1918 is the big year. That was the last time we had a big pandemic.
Yeah.
That's also exactly the year that Harry Gill started Gill Athletics.
You're kidding.
Yeah. It's kind of, I don't want to call it funny because, the pandemic was nothing really funny, but it's like out of, bad economic times, great businesses grow. Wow. So it's awesome to see, the start of something here in this bad economic time through the pandemic, man. That's amazing. That really
Yeah,
is
it's been
amazing.
cool. We've had, we got 10 trainers that all have jobs that are doing great. And, I feel really good about that. I don't know how much money we'll ever make. But you feel pretty good about employing people and giving a
Yeah.
great product to clients and stuff like that.
Amen.
And we're super excited about, the indoor track potential. I'm sure hopefully some listeners here that'll, have some interest in that. Because we're hoping to provide something that's very unique in the world, actually.
Yeah, well, you're going to do that. That's we're just going to speak that into existence. Talking to you about that project, it's going to happen,
Yeah.
and it's going to affect so many people. Like the number of people you think it's going to affect, times 10, times 100, man. It's going to be great, and it's going to be, really the not the start, but it's going to be a part of the puzzle of your legacy of what you've done in the sport of track and field, Brian.
Cool. Awesome, man. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, man. It's kind of funny, we talk about how these podcast interviews kind of go like a bio podcast, an autobiography. And, and this is why, I talked to you about, we don't do a lot of research because I like to see where it goes. And I love that this turned into like a leverage of your 20 plus years of coaching high school, man. I think there's just so much value there for listeners. And I think, this is going to be one of those podcast interviews that, resonates for quite a while. People say, hey, I'm just getting into coaching, or hey, I'm kind of feeling stuck. It's like, hey man, go back and listen to Brian Kula on the Gill podcast. There's a lot of knowledge spit out today, man. It's awesome. And I'm just
Awesome.
so thankful.
I appreciate you having me on. What a great opportunity. Love this sport. Love the, your guys' company, and everybody that's listening. Just appreciate you taking the time.
Awesome, man. Brian, thank you so much. Again, the most valuable thing that you can ever give me is your time. So, we did about an hour and a half. That's pretty good, man. That might be on the shorter side. We'll have to get you back for a part 2. Might have to get, it'll be fun to do like maybe like a, I don't know what I would call it, but a duel, like you and JT together.
Oh yeah,
I gotta get JT on here one day, man. He's just
you get JT and I on, you better pencil in more than 2 hours.
Hey, the record I think is just at 4 hours. So
okay.
I'm a long haul guy, man. We can make it happen, Captain. Let me tell you.
All right.
Everybody listening right now is like 4 hours. Come on, Mike. You're killing me.
Right.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Right.
But man, Brian, thanks again. I really do appreciate, just love your openness and authenticity today, and talking about the highs and the lows, things that you struggle with, because I think that's again what's going to help listeners, to help them grow. And again, this is part of your impact, right? There's coaches that you will never know that listen today that are going to be impacted, or at least going to find out who Tony Wells is. If we did nothing today, please go look up Tony Wells, man. What a great coach in person that we had in this great sport. So man, Brian, thanks you so much for being here today.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks so much. God bless.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for being here today, listening, man. It's not lost on me that you spent an hour and a half today, and sometimes 2 hours. And every once in a while, I'll throw a little one at you and just do only an hour for you. And I'm just so thankful that you'd be here with us on the Gill Athletics podcast and listening week after week. It just amazes me, and I'm just so humbled by that. Again, part of the goal here is to give value to others. So if you received value today, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that someone else in your network would probably receive value from listening to Brian's story. So share it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever else you crazy kids are doing. I don't know. I'm still a text and email guy, but that works too. You can share it through text and email, but share it with someone else and give them value, and show up next week, man. We're going to do it again. We're going to have another amazing coach and talk about their journey and connect them with you. So thanks a lot and have a great week.